Hello and welcome to Division F's podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Division F podcast.
Hello and welcome to Division F's podcast.
Hello and welcome to Division F's podcast.
Hello and welcome to Division F's podcast.
Hello and welcome to Division F podcast. Do you need a real source of inspiration? Is it possible for you to read multiple genre of books in a single day itself? Do you want to know how to become a person who can inspire many with a small smile, with the right content and delivery when you're addressing a group of people? If yes, then this is for you.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Division F podcast. And I'll be your host today, Aditya Anil. I am the president of Sophrosyne VIT. And today with us, we have a very accomplished guest, one who has worked for 14 years in the field of leadership and change management, stress management, etc. A triple graduate post-degree holder in literature, linguistics, and psychology, and also has a very fascinating passion about criminal psychology. We'll get to know her more. Welcome to our show, DTM Aarthi.
Thank you so much, Aditya. It's my pleasure to be here today.
That's brilliant. I have to ask you, so what directed you to choose these three particular postgraduate degrees, literature, linguistics, and psychology?
Okay, actually, I have 4 postgraduate degrees. The one that's missing is mass communication and journalism, which is what I did right after my graduation. I wanted to be a journalist, so I went ahead and did mass communication and journalism. However, after joining the industry, I realized that life is a little different than what we had expected. So I switched careers, and when I switched careers is when I got into training. I started off as a process trainer and then moved into communication training. And when I started doing communication training, one of the areas I focused on was voice and accent. So to add on to my resume and not just know it practically, but also understand the theory behind voice and accent training, I did a course in linguistics. I did my PG in linguistics. That kind of helped me propel myself in my career. Literature has always been a love interest. So I just pursued literature for the sake of my interest. And then slowly from a voice and accent trainer, I transitioned into a behavioral and leadership trainer. Once again, when I had to deal with people, I kind of had a very good practical knowledge. As a person, I am empathetic. But when I started training people, I realized that if you use terminologies and theories and names and drop some jargons over here, people tend to believe you a little more than they would if you only talk from your experience. So that's when I said, for my training background, what would help will be a master's in psychology. Criminology is something that fascinated me. I am the kind of person, as a child, I was into Hardy Boys and Nancy Drews and slowly grew into a lot of other investigative books. I enjoyed all these thriller movies and even series like Criminal Minds and many of these crime series was what always captured my fascination. And I think this mixture about being interested in investigation and thrillers, along with trying to understand how the human mind works, that's when I thought, okay, let me do a course on criminology to just know what it is all about. And that's about it in a nutshell. Mostly out of interest is what I pursued my learning.
That is absolutely wonderful. I believe in an ideal world, we should pursue education just because of interest and not because of necessity, I think it's very safe to say that people in India, most of them, they study engineering first, and then they start thinking about what they actually want to do in their life.
Well, I should say I've been lucky in that one area. While I did not have a clear aim or goal of becoming a trainer per se, I kind of fell into it by accident and it worked in my favor.
That is incredible. That's actually, I'm really happy that you got to, work in a field that you're really happy about. Also, out of curiosity, what do you think was the most surprising thing that you learned in criminal psychology? Like something that you learned for the first time and it just absolutely blew your mind.
Well, one particular thing that surprised me was the concept of serial killers. We look at most of these people as deranged or completely mentally unstable. But the reality is they could be living right next door, leading a completely simple, normal life like you and me. You would not even suspect that they have that kind of a mental challenge. And the triggers that, how do I say, changed them in that particular area are also very simple triggers. There are a lot of deep rooted problems, and those deep rooted problems are waiting for an outlet. And the trigger is the most important. And 90% of the times, if people can only be a little kind and empathetic, we can avoid these triggers and help these people. Rather than having to hunt them down as serial killers, you actually can help these people by showing a little amount of empathy and kindness. And that surprised me that a person living right next to me, leading a normal life, could have gone through so much of trauma that they could turn this way. And the remedy, or we could have actually prevented the entire episode by a little amount of kindness and understanding. For me, that was an eye opener.
That is indeed very insightful as well. And I think with India's current stance on mental health awareness, I think more people should be aware of this. And if I were to say that students, should be taught amateur psychology, okay, not amateur psychology, but like should be given a basis of psychology, like right in school as a subject, how do you react to that? Like, do you have any further recommendations so that people may understand each other better, like from a very young age?
I would completely agree, not just from understanding each other, but understanding or knowing about psychology will also help you deal with your own feelings. If I, on average, pick about 10 adults, the people in the age of, let's say, 30 years, that particular group, just pick 10 random adults. At least 7 of them have been abused in some way or the other. Either they've been body shamed or they've been physically abused, by their parents, or they've been gone through corporal punishment. They've been sexually abused. 7 out of 10 people. And the challenge is, as a society, I'm talking India in particular, we are expected to press all these feelings deep down and pretend like everything is normal. When I do not have a normal childhood, when I am affected and I do not know how to deal with it, me being a normal adult, having a family and leading it in the right direction is a challenge. So from that perspective, teaching psychology to kids, especially in school, will help them cope better with the challenges that they are facing. And from that perspective, I'm completely with you on the idea of teaching basic psychology to school children.
I'm glad you share the same sentiments. And I personally believe that parents should also go through some sort of education in psychology, or maybe child psychology or child rearing before having kids, so that we can prevent, this cycle of like emotional abuse per se. I suppose everything that you mentioned before falls under the category of emotional or other psychological abuse. Some physical as well, but yes.
I would agree with you, because most of the parents do it without even realizing the harm that they are inflicting on the kids. They have absolutely no idea that what they are doing has a repercussion, which they can't even imagine. Not all children turn out that way, or not all children express it that way, but it hurts them. And it's important that parents are aware of it while you're trying what's best for the child. Something very simple that happened a couple of days back. I hope I can share an example. I'm a single parent. I'm not married, but I wanted a child, so I adopted a daughter. She's 4.5 years now. So my mom, I, and we went to a place near Coimbatore, which is like a waterfalls. Now, my daughter don't like or does not like water falling on her head. So she hates waterfalls, but she loves to play in the pool of water that collects from the waterfalls, or she loves to play in the sea. So we went, my mom was at the bank, we left all the bags with her, and she and I, we jumped into the water pool and we were just splashing around, collecting pebbles, throwing and having fun. For about 45 minutes, we enjoyed. Mom from there tried saying, go to the waterfalls, go to the waterfalls. We completely ignored. We went back and, we changed. And after we changed, we were having a conversation. My mom was like, why didn't you take her there? I said, see, she does not want it. She's scared of the water falling on her head. She's uncomfortable with it. And I don't want to force her. My mom was immediately, oh, if I was there in your position, I would have somehow forced or convinced her and taken her to the waterfall. Very simple, but that can have a huge impact. Like, I'm scared of all these horror movies. When I tried explaining it to my mom as a child, she said, oh, there is nothing called ghosts. This is all fiction. But for a child, I could not understand the difference between fiction and reality. And even now, I travel all over the world all alone. I drive back home from office at about 3:45, 4 early morning, and I'm absolutely not scared. But you make me watch a horror movie for the next couple of days, I can't sleep. So that is the impact that something like this can have on a child. And that's why I strongly feel that parents need to go through some kind of in most Christian weddings, they have a marriage counseling where in the church they are put through a session on how to live as a couple, what are the challenges and how to communicate. Similarly, if we can come up with a way by which anyone who conceives, they have 10 months, and in that 10 months, they must go through a course, or rather only if you finish the course, you can go ahead and conceive. I know I'm talking about a utopian world, but if that happens, nothing like it.
No, that would really be wonderful. Get your degree before having a child. Yeah. Okay. So from what you just said before, so you know how children can be very fussy and they don't want to do things, that are good for them. For example, babies, they would love to stick their fingers in an electric socket, but then obviously you can't just let them do that. So, well, my question is, where do you draw the line between forcing them to do things that they have to do for themselves that is good for them, and then letting them take their own time to, get acclimated to that good thing? Like, how do you maneuver around this complicated gray area?
Unfortunately, or rather fortunately, it's not as complicated or gray. There is a difference between a child being scared of something. When the child is reluctant to do something, you need to sit, talk to the child, and try and understand why the child is reluctant. Now, what I spoke about not wanting to get in the water falls is a fear. The child has a fear, and I've seen that recurring in many places. For example, she enjoys the shower being on, but she will never stand under the shower. She just likes the shower being on and she'll put her hand or leg in, but she will not get completely into the shower. So I know that the child has a fear for water on her head. But in the swimming pool or even in the sea, she does not mind going swimming in the water. So there's something about this that the child is not comfortable with. That is one understanding. So the fear is what I'm talking about. But when your child does something like putting her fingers in the socket, which is harmful, there are two ways to prevent. Number one, I make sure that all these danger areas are adequately covered so she does not play. And whenever she does something, I sit her down and I explain why it is dangerous. Luckily, we have enough and more videos available on YouTube for me to actually show a demonstration of what can happen if she goes and plays with scissors, for example. And the school plays a huge role. Like, she's in her kindergarten and she believes whatever her teacher says and she listens to whatever her teacher says. And in her school, the children's happiness is her first priority. Second is discipline. Only third is education. And I think that's important because she's happy going to school. There are a lot of these little things like safe, unsafe. They tell her these things are safe, these things are unsafe, this is what you got to do. So they teach her about discipline and safety rules, and then they start focusing on her ABCs, which is perfectly fine. And I follow the same method at home. The challenge is A child should not see what you are doing because they start mimicking you. And children like attention, whether it's positive attention or negative attention. We only give positive attention when the child has done something good. So say, for example, she's drawn something beautifully. We are like, wow, great. We clap hands, we encourage, we hug her. We do a lot of things at that point of time. But when the child does something bad, instead of telling the child what you did was bad and I'm upset because of you putting your finger in the socket, we just scream at the child. So what happens? I get appreciated for something when I do something good. But in general, people start screaming at me. It should be the other way around. You give appreciation unconditionally. When you want to scold or reprimand, do it with a condition. So the child's belief is my mom loves me, my dad loves me. But when I do something wrong, they are not happy with that. And that level of conditioning should start when the child is about, say, 3 months old. We assume the child does not realize, but the child can understand, the child can observe. And if you start this behavior right from that particular age, you will be able to easily model the child's behavior. And crude example, don't tell the child not to put her fingers in the socket and you put your fingers in the socket. The child sees that, they will definitely do it. And when the child does something like that, the best way to stop is to ignore. The minute you start screaming at her and telling her don't do it, start shouting, they will keep doing that behavior again and again. The best way to stop a child doing something is to not give the attention. Take the attention away from those kind of bad behaviors. It'll stop doing it. When you give attention by punishing or reprimanding and shouting and screaming, they don't care whether it is negative attention or positive attention. Attention is what children seek. And when they get the attention somehow or the other, they'll keep doing that behavior again and again and again. I hope I was able to answer that question.
Yes, you were. And I think it was very elaborate and very informative. And I think in a nutshell, you could say to basically treat kids like individuals, give them the respect that they deserve and listen to them. But at the same time, to model their behavior using positive reinforcement and selective attention. I hope I captured all of that correctly.
Absolutely. You did a better job of telling what I had in mind than I did.
No. Okay, so we did have a very interesting conversation about pedagogy, but then I think I would like to pan over and talk a little bit about your journey at Toastmasters.
Right.
So could you tell me how you came to know about Toastmasters and how you ended up joining Toastmasters?
Honestly, how I came to know, I have no idea, because I've heard of this term somewhere. I've done some research online because I heard of it somewhere. And I like this concept of public speaking, a platform for me to go ahead and share my ideas and thoughts. That's how I looked at it. When I joined Toastmasters, I was already a leadership trainer. So both communication and leadership were not areas that I wanted to learn. And that's not the reason why I joined Toastmasters. For me, it was more about networking, an opportunity to share my thoughts and ideas to a group of like-minded people. And one thing that I loved about Toastmasters was the contest. It kind of kept you going, right? You start preparing, you start working for it. And for me, that was a major area of interest, I would rather say. So that's where I started looking at Toastmasters, and my own organization, when I joined in 2016 CSS Corp, they had a club. And since after a lot of searching here, I know my own organization had a club, I jumped into it immediately.
That's amazing. And what would you say was the most significant? I know you did not join Toastmasters to learn, but I'm sure you must have taken away like 1 or 2 life lessons or something from Toastmasters. So what would you say was that one thing?
It's always easily said, if you want to succeed, don't be scared of failures. The fear of failure should not be there when you're looking at it from wanting to move ahead in life or wanting to succeed. It's so easily said, but it's not done. But for me, Toastmasters was at one place where I could get rid of the fear of failure. As I told you, I already had 14 years of experience when I joined Toastmasters. But I was okay to go try new things and make a fool of myself and have people laugh at me or try something that didn't work or lose a contest. I was okay with all these things. And for me, that ability to fail without the fear of failure was one of the biggest takeaways from Toastmasters. When today people come and ask, what is it that we would gain by Toastmasters? Communication and leadership is such a small portion. But this one aspect of overcoming fear of failure and improving your confidence is such a huge benefit that many people don't even realize that they've received that.
Indeed, and I hope all the new Toastmasters who listen to this podcast take something away from this discussion. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Keep going. You'll someday reach. I don't want to say greatness, but then you will reach somewhere that you never expected to be.
I think that means every day is a success. You start trying to compete against yourself. You know what you want to be, and you start working towards it. So you're absolutely right. You would surprise yourself by where you reached after a couple of months.
Indeed. And I kind of want to ask you about this one thing. It's a rather philosophical question. Do you think there is any merit in the pursuit of greatness, say the pursuit of accolades, trying to be the best out there? Like, what do you think are some of the pros and cons of that pursuit?
I think that's completely dependent on individuals. Like my father, for example, he never believed in any of this. He was more of a typical family man who was very happy to spend time with his wife and daughter and be content with this little world that the three of us were. Even if you ask me what we did during our spare time, I have no idea. We would just sit outside on the steps of our house. Since it was an independent house, we had a little garden and we could see the sky. We would just sit with my dog and we'll just keep talking about movies or singing songs. And that's what he liked. That's what he lived for. Till he passed away, that was what he lived for. But me, on the other hand, as an individual, I keep my own goals. Like when I joined Toastmasters, since I had no idea, I said I want to finish my CC10 in the next couple of months. And somehow that triggered me on. And every time I walked into a meeting, I always wanted to walk away with one of those best speaker or best TT speaker or best evaluator ribbons. If you ask me, does it define me? Yes, it does, because I am happy with who I am. Maybe it does not define me the way you would want to define me or way someone else would want to define me. But for me, I'm competitive. I want to make sure that I give my best in all scenarios and I want to take away from it. So getting a DTM, for example, I know a lot of people say, oh, DTM is just yet another term. That's about it. Yes, it's just yet another term. It's like saying I'm married and because of that, I put a Mrs. in front of me. But for me, it has a lot of meaning. It's a goal that I want to pursue, because if, let's say I stop pursuing any goals in Toastmasters, after a couple of years, if you come and ask me, okay, what have you done in the last 2 years in Toastmasters? I might not have an answer. I might not. Even as a mentor, I'll be happy if I say, oh, I've mentored 2 people and both of them today are district directors, or I've mentored 3 people and all of them are district level contestants. So somewhere for me, I need a measure. And that's why this is very individual specific. And it's perfect whether it means something to you or it means nothing to you, as long as you're living on your own terms. As you rightly said, don't do an engineering degree because your dad wanted you to. Do it because you love engineering.
Indeed. Those are very useful advice. Though with the engineering thing, I suppose Indian parents have to be more open to very different career paths, because they go like, oh, engineering, medicine, that's where you get the money, go for it.
I think it's also because they do not know what are the career paths available.
That is very true. To be honest, I personally did not even know about all the different career paths open to an engineer rather than just a technical job. Like there are so many different things, and only when I started searching for it, like towards the end of my college years, I got to understand how many different opportunities are out there and like how narrow our perspective is, like going into everything.
True.
Yeah. So I've come across some of your conferences and some of the things that you teach, and I would like you to explain in brief one thing, that is, what is the impact of voice modulation, and what do you think is the psychological impact that voice modulation has on the audience?
See, your voice modulation clearly tells your audience what you're thinking. What is your emotion at that point of time? Like how important body language is, equally important as voice modulation. Because without voice modulation, you really don't know what you're expressing. Am I happy about it or am I sad about it? What is the emotion I'm trying to convey? In fact, a very simple way we teach people voice modulation is whenever you see a verb, go ahead and enact it. The minute you start enacting verbs, at some point of time, you will understand that that's where you'll have to start modulating. There are many rules to it, but keeping the rules aside, this is a very simple trick to practice voice modulation. Why do we insist? Because again, it is your emotions that your audience picks on. We talk about storytelling. Why? Because the emotion has a strong connect. Without emotions, there will be a huge gap in the connect that you have with your audience. And that is why voice modulation plays a major role. However strong your content is, if you're not telling it in the right way, then the content will fall through deaf ears.
That is very true. All of the most passionate and moving speeches that I've heard are chock full of emotion, and you can really hear it in their voices that they actually mean what they're talking about. And again, all the novice listeners to this podcast, I hope you can take away and try to incorporate voice modulation into not just your speeches, but maybe also in your day-to-day conversations. On that note, I know it's a bit of a jump, but what is your opinion on leadership by influence, since we're talking about emotions? What's your opinion and what's your, say, advice on leading by influence rather than authority?
See, it is very situational. Okay, and a lot of people, for example, I believe in leading by influence. However, there are times where you have to use your authority to get work done. So what is important is the goal that you want to achieve in the entire process, the outcome, and based on that goal and outcome, keeping your, people, team members, how I want to call it, keeping their satisfaction in mind. You should never compromise your members or your team members' needs for your needs. The team members' needs and your needs and the goals of the team will have to match with each other. And based on that, you need to decide. Sometimes you will have to take up the authoritative leadership style to get something done. And there are times, or rather most of the times, you'll have to go with the leadership from an influencing perspective. I always tell you need to take your decisions logically, but when you convey them, you need to keep the emotional connect, because people connect only with what you tell them, not why you tell them. Many a times the why is lost. That is why your decisions must be logical, but the way you convey it must be emotional. Similarly, as a leader, there are some times when you have to go ahead and take the authoritative leadership role. And if you fail doing it, then you're failing the people who believe in you.
That is a lot to think about. I mean, yes, I have heard the phrase, marketing is more about emotion than logic. And I suppose it really does translate to every interaction that humans have in all areas.
In life, everything is marketing, right?
Indeed it is. Okay, so I would like to move in another direction. I hope I'm not giving you whiplash by jumping from different topics.
Nah, I'm comfortable.
That's wonderful. So, what I think I know the answer to this question, but then what kind of movies do you like the best? What genre do you like the best?
You've guessed it. It is thrillers.
Okay, so when you watch thrillers, as you have done, I mean, you've already completed a doctorate, a postgraduate degree in psychology. So, do you end up psychoanalyzing the movie, the characters in the movie, like while you watch the movie?
Yes, I do. That's kind of become a second habit, unfortunately. But I think that's part of the enjoyment, trying to find out why, what, guessing what could be next. So I enjoyed that. But yes, I do.
I do too. So I have to ask, do you ever feel like it has ruined your movie watching experience to a certain degree that many movies have become too predictable, or you can just guess what's going to happen next, so that it kind of just ruins the surprise and the impact of the movie for you? Like, have you ever experienced anything of that sort, or do you still completely enjoy just as much as you did before you understood the motives?
Not to sound snobbish, but the truth is, some of these movies, like, oh yeah, okay, it's an okay movie. People will go gaga over it, like, wow, wonderful. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, but wasn't a great movie. Not many movies for me get into the genre of wow, fantastic, because of this habit of psychoanalyzing.
I can totally understand and relate to a certain extent, to be honest. So, from the top of your head, I see that you love to cook, and I believe I'm just an amateur chef. I'm no brilliant. I do know to make a few things myself. But then, would you tell the audience some of the things that you enjoy cooking the most?
Okay, I'm just wondering where you heard this news that I love to cook. I'm an amateur cook by myself. Uh, I think it's that again. It'll all circle back to my daughter. As a Even as a teenager, I just love kids. So I've always wanted to be a mother, to do things for your kids, share knowledge, play with them, teach them things, feed them. And from that perspective, I've started baking. So I make some cakes. Cupcakes are something that I'm good at, and I do make some extremely delicious pasta, even if I claim that by myself, and some Indian sweets like paniyarams. So I'm more of a snack person, or rather, I cook snacks rather than a proper meal. And yes, I've been exploring, I think, the last 3 years or so into baking.
That is wonderful. I have tried my hand at baking. Cakes are fine, but breads, oh my God, anything but baking a bread.
I've just tried cakes because for me, uh, simple pleasures. It's nice to put that little cupcake with some decorations on in your daughter's box, give it for school, and she comes back with the box being clean, nothing more.
Indeed, I can
So
imagine the happiness. Um, what other hobbies do you follow other than criminal psychology and baking cakes? I hope you don't
I used to
merge the
read.
two.
No, perfect, perfect. I used to read a lot, but then right now, for the past couple of years, I'm not able to find time, to be honest. I'm juggling between work, Toastmasters, and also taking care of my daughter. One thing which I've always had been fascinated or wanted to do, but I never had an opportunity, was to draw. And during the pandemic, I still have a drawing master who comes home and teaches my kid. So along with her, I'm also learning to draw. And I think that's the minute you're able to draw something like a flower, for example. Many times when I take pictures of what I've drawn, put it on Facebook or any of the social media, people are like, wow, such a beautiful drawing by your daughter. And I'm like, no, 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 that's me. But still, that one little pleasure I get from being able to do something that I always wanted to do is immense. Drawing is one of the hobbies I've picked recently.
That is beautiful. It really is. I can almost imagine a mother and a daughter and drawing teacher just sitting and drawing any like random pictures, and there's just maybe music playing in the background. It just sounds very lovely.
It is.
Just a moment.
Sure.
Yeah, so you were talking about how you're not able to read as much as you wanted before. So, do you think it's going to die, like reading? Do you think it's going to die off in like the future years? Because now we have, because at the end of the day, reading is just a mode of communication of stories or information, etc. Right? But now we have movies, we have YouTube videos, and we have articles, like short form articles compared to long styled reading novels and everything. So do you think reading will die off sometime in the next, say, like 10 to 15 years? Or do you think it is a skill that we should hold on tightly to?
I honestly believe that it will not die because currently people are more aware of the benefits of reading and they are encouraging their kids to read. So when I was a child, my school, we had a library and we had a library period, and I just picked the habit of reading. It was of interest to me and I started pursuing it. But my parents never advocated for it. But today I'm advocating my daughter to pick up reading. I bring her some books. I just leave the books lying around in the house. So we have a nighttime practice where I take one of those books and read a bedtime story and she goes to sleep. So I started encouraging the habit of reading, and many parents. And the good thing is, at least when I was a child, reading was for the upper middle class and the upper class as such. But today, even what we would classify as the middle class, parents are more aware of the importance of reading and they are encouraging children. Reading will come back in style very soon. Maybe the mode will change, whether I'll still take a physical book, a paper copy and start reading, maybe not. Today, that has changed. But reading as a habit will definitely make a very strong comeback in the next few years.
That sounds very encouraging. As you mentioned, now we're moving on to different types of information, like sources of information. It's not just reading paperbacks anymore. Like you can just search anything on the internet and get it. And we're living in a time where information and knowledge is accessible more than ever to as like a huge portion of the population. Like you don't need to have all that many resources to access information. But do you think people, even with all of this knowledge, are becoming smarter in general? Or do you think people are just the same, but just with more information? Like from your experience.
Kids are smarter, adults are dumber. I'm sorry to be so crude. But what happens is child has the ability to think and ask questions. Now, like they say, education spoiled me. It is so true. Right now, what is happening is education is only talking about a set pattern rather than allowing the child to explore and learn from the exploration. So by the time the child becomes an adult and goes through those 12 years of education and then 4 years of graduation, the ability to think is unfortunately not encouraged. So
that is very true. Sorry, you were saying something.
No, so with all this information that you have in hand, for example, I know a lot of people who believe that what they read in Wikipedia is the absolute truth. And even when you try telling them that what is in Wikipedia is people's opinion or facts that people know and believe it, they just think it's absolutely true. Unlike a book where research has been done and there is bibliography which talks about the contents of the book, the research, the details. A Wikipedia or Google search does not have that particular validity. And that is what we need to talk about. We need to educate people that, it's fine. If you want to know where to start, go Google. I'm not against Google. I still use a lot of Google for my basic data. But once you have basic information, once you know that this is the direction that you want to go into, you will have to focus more on the research that you do to get that information. Don't take Google's word as the last word.
Yes, at the end of the day, check your sources, right?
Yes. So that's why children are smarter, but people, as they become adults, we stop thinking. We just find it easy. I mean, I know a period where I was reading a book when I was in school. We will not understand a word. I would underline it, but I wouldn't stop to pick up a dictionary. I would use, the common sense that we're supposed to have. Just go along with the sentence or the story that's happening and guess the meaning of the word. But I would underline it, and after I finished, the second thoughts. I always ask this question to most of the excom officers or to even the area directors and division directors. Was there any time in your journey that you said, enough is enough, I want to quit? If you've not felt the need to quit, then you've not got out of your comfort zone. And the only way for all of us to grow and learn, and all of us here in Toastmasters especially, we are doing things because we want to grow and we want to learn. And that learning will happen only when you go ahead and get out of your comfort zone. So wherever you get an opportunity, get out of your comfort zone, explore new things, learn from those opportunities, because life is short, and let's get as much as possible we want to do in that short period.
Thank you so much for those inspiring words. And thank you for your time. It was really fascinating to talk about all of those various topics with you. I suppose this interview was almost like a reenactment of Pulp Fiction with different things happening at different places.
That's true.
And thank you so much for your valuable time. And I would like to thank Toastmasters for this opportunity, and tune in for the next episode, viewers. And I hope you gained something out of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aditya, for having me here. It was a wonderful experience, and thank you. Wishing you a great journey ahead in this initiative of yours.
Thank you, ma'am.